So when we're trying to understand the organization of solids, one of the things we run across is something called a unit cell, and also something called the crystal lattice. And it's often that those two terms are sort of mixed together. So let me explain to you what a unit cell is really quickly. So you'll notice I have this pattern of spheres, circles over here, right? This is supposed to represent a two-dimensional crystal lattice, a two-dimensional organization. Now, you notice I use this word crystal lattice, right? It's often used in the context of it's that repeating pattern that you see as in a solid that's called a crystal lattice, okay? But it also has some other meanings, and we'll get to the other meaning after we talk about what the unit cell is. The unit cell is the smallest unit of a crystal when repeated in 3 dimensions. This one's 2-dimension. Reproduces the entire crystal lattice. Okay, so in that context, this whole thing that we're looking at is the crystal lattice. So I'm going to draw points from here to here, and then from here to here, and here to here, and here. And this cube, right, makes up my my unit cell. The reason it's the unit cell is if I draw it again, like right here, right, I get this pattern in here, which is exactly the same as this pattern in here. Now, one of the things that people think is like if I started here, I can't start anywhere else. But that's not necessarily true, because what happens if I start here? It doesn't work so good for my demonstration here, but you notice that's the exact same unit cell. So I could have started on this atom too. And the idea is that the unit cell is the smallest unit that when replicated produces the entire crystal lattice. And either one of those could have done it. So for the way I've drawn this and the word talking about it though, we're going to assume that we start out over here, here, and here. Now, I'm going to define this point as a lattice point. And when we're looking at the crystal lattice, right, we're actually, when they talk about it in the more technical sense, the crystal lattice is the repetition of these lattice points in such a way that reproduces the entire crystal structure. So another lattice point would be here. I'd have another one here. I'd have another one here. And another one here. I would also have one down here because I could also draw a unit cell here that fits with this unit cell here. So the lattice points don't actually include all the atoms, just one point in the unit cell. And it doesn't actually have to be the corner, it just has to be some feature that repeats. So, for example, I could have picked the center, and that could have been a lattice point as well. All right, so if I extend this just to give you the idea, it looks something like that. That is, I have this lattice point on this unit cell. If I replicate that over and over again, I would create the entire crystal lattice that way. I found on Quora a really good example of unit cells, lattice points, and the crystal lattice, and I'll show you that on the next slide. All right, so one of the things I don't like about this drawing is every atom could be somewhere directly on one of the corners or dead center in the middle, and there's lots of unit cells for solids that don't do that. So I like this one that I found on Quora. Now you can look at this and you can definitely see that there's some sort of pattern that's repeating. If you spend enough time looking at it, right, there's like these 3 blue dots, and then you skip over and there's 3 blue, and then you skip over and there's 3 blue. So the question is what does the unit cell for this look like? And so what you do in the more complicated example like this is you somewhat arbitrarily choose to put a dot somewhere. So let's say we put our dot in between the blues, like that. And then I can put one in over here, right? And I can put one in over here. I'll go back down here. I can put one there, and there, and there. Now I'm going to change to a slightly different drawing mode so I can sort of highlight what's going on here. I'm going to try this and try not to screw it up. But I can actually draw a line. No, maybe I can't draw the line. Going dead center through all the blue points, like that. And I can draw another one like this. And if I go like this, I'm just trying to do this so you can see this properly, right? You notice that this is exactly what this is, right? So what I did is I just found a point. It's not actually on an atom. I found a point in my structure here, and I drew a reference point there, and I made that reference point in all the other similar places, and then I drew the lines to see what I came up with. And that showed me that this was the unit cell, and there really is no smaller repeating unit, because if I make it any smaller, then I won't have 3 yellows, 3 purples, and then a bunch of blue ones in here. And so this is these lines essentially represent my unit cell. That's one of my unit cells. Okay, so let me erase this, and I'm going to show you this in another way, because they already had another image in Quora. It looks like that. That's a much cleaner representation of the lattice points, which are in red. Okay, again, not actually on one of the atoms. And again, I could have done it by putting it between here, and then I would have had my unit cell like this, or I could have put it on the yellows, and I would have had a unit cell like this, right? Okay, so for the stuff that we're doing in this class, typically we're going to put the dot or the line through an atom, but there's one other skill I wanted to teach you in here, and that is actually being able to count the number of atoms that are in a unit cell. And that's why this more precise drawing is important. So this is what I'm going to do. You have, so what I want to do is count the number of each type of atom in each unit cell. Okay, and we're just going to call them pink, blue, and yellow. Okay, so it's easy to count the pink ones. There's 1, 2, 3, right? This is my unit cell here, actually, that's highlighted. 1, 2, and 3. The yellows, there's 1, 2, and 3. So if I'm writing this down, what I'm writing is I have 3 yellows per unit cell. I have 3 pinks per unit cell. Now, how many blue ones do I have, right? So if I zoom in a little bit, and this is actually supposed to be like right on the line, but the line's not drawn quite right. But you'll notice like this atom, he's half in this unit cell and half in this unit cell. This one is half in this one and half in this one. And this one, even though it's not drawn quite right, this one is supposed to be half in this one and half in this one. All right, so how do I count that, right? So for sure, for the blues, I have 1 blue plus, that's this guy, that's my 1. I have 1, 2, 3 that are half in one unit cell and half in the other. So I'm going to say 1 half times 3. So that gives me a total of 4 blues in each unit cell. So the total number of atoms that I would have in this unit cell would be 3, 6, and 4, which is a total of 10. So each one of these unit cells will contain 10 atoms of these types. And again, in order to count it accurately, you have to look to see how much of each one is in the unit cell. Okay, so there's 7 different kinds of unit cells. Fortunately, we're going to ignore most of them, and we're going to spend our time trying to understand the cubic in a lot of detail, the hexagonal in some detail, and the others I'm just going to mention on this slide. The way you interpret what's written underneath each one is that, for example, in a cubic unit cell, right? You've seen a cube before. All the sides are equal. So they're saying that the vector going in this direction is A, this is C, and this is B, right? A, B, and C are all the same lengths, which is what you'd expect for a cube, just like you would expect A and B to be equal for square, right? And then if it's a cube, then every corner is a right angle, and so we end up having the angles alpha, beta, and gamma equal to 90 degrees. In a tetragonal unit cell, all that means is that they're all 90 degrees, but one of the sides is longer than the other. And an orthorhombic, right? None of the sides are equal to each other, but we're still at right angles to each other. And then rhombohedral, all the sides are the same, but one of the angles is not 90 degrees. And then in hexagonal, what we have, and you have to think about that for a second. Hexagonal implies 6, right? And we'll have to show you this, but hexagonal patterns, that is 6-sided shapes, actually can be derived from 4-sided shapes. So, or cubes. Anyways, we'll get to that. But A, B are the same, but one of the sides is different, right? And then A and B are 90, but gamma, which is this angle here, that's 120. And then in monoclinic, that means that none of the sides are the same, right? Two of the corners angles are 90 and one is not. And then triclinic is just nothing. Makes sense, but it's a repeating pattern anyway. So there's nothing is the same, but the pattern still repeats. So let's go ahead and look at some basic terms, and then we'll start analyzing unit cells. So two important terms relating to the stability of a unit cell and the structure of the unit cell are the coordination number and the packing efficiency. So the coordination number is the number of atoms that each atom is in direct contact with. Okay? What does that exactly mean? So I'm going to show you quickly a picture we'll analyze here in a second. But it means like the structure here, right? Every atom's touching each other atom, and this represents one corner of a unit cell. So you can imagine this is a sphere, right? But we've cut it away to show that this is a cubic unit cell. But notice what happens here, right? This atom in the middle is in contact with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's one hiding in the back, 8. But you notice that these guys, the way this is structured, these aren't touching each other. The radii don't quite extend to reach each other. So again, when we're talking about the coordination number, it's the number of atoms that an atom can make direct contact with in the unit cell. And then the packing efficiency is the percentage of the volume, right, occupied by the atoms of the unit cell. So they say spheres here, but really it's the atoms of the unit cell. So if you're looking at this unit cell, you notice there's a big space in here. You can tell that's really inefficient. That is, there's a big space inside this unit cell that doesn't have atoms in it. And in part, right, that's because the coordination number is low. The higher the coordination number, the closer the atoms are together as a whole, and the better the packing efficiency. And what'll happen is, as the packing efficiency goes up, or the coordination number goes up, those structures become more stable because they're held together in more places. Okay? You'll notice this one, right, if we're talking about packing efficiency, well, there's some inefficiency here, around here, but most of this empty space that's here is actually occupied by an atom now. Okay? So, again, we're going to be looking at these structures. We won't really be talking that much about coordination number and packing efficiency, but these two terms are important in understanding sort of the structure of the unit cell and the stability of the unit cell.